September 6th, Thursday, the lecture at Seattle Center entitled Entering the Post-Guru Age. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That is full and this is full. The full is taken out of the full. Take out the full from the full and the full remains. It is this pristine spiritual tradition which forms the background of our theme this evening. Before we come to the post-Guru era, we have to be clear in our minds on what is a Guru. What is the necessity of a Guru? What's the role that the Guru is expected to play in the life of a seeker who becomes his disciple? Before one enters into spiritual life of any kind, one needs to know what one seeks, what's the path, and what's the goal. And that knowledge of the true object of life, the way to seek it, is there embedded in the heart of man, in each person. It is there as a closed bud of lotus. There is the eternal Veda, the book of knowledge, which gives the supreme unerring wisdom. No one can teach a person what is not within him. All knowledge is an unfolding of this bud of knowledge within. Every experience of life, every event that happens, every stimulation that is provided unties these teguments of the soul, helps open this bud of knowledge petal by petal. But not all are so circumstanced as to be sensitive to this unfolding inner knowledge. So tradition provides for what is called a scripture, a sacred book, sacred treatises which contain records of spiritual experiences, realizations of seekers, of guide rules, of the wisdom garnered across the ages by leaders of humanity. And these scriptures stimulate the inner knowledge and draw it out. But these scriptures again, there is the letter and the spirit. While the knowledge is contained in words of human language, there is something in our words, terminology, that constricts the knowledge, the wisdom. That is why it is said in one of the major scriptures of India, the Gita, that God is in the world, but take care to go beyond the word. Don't be a prisoner of the word. There is a stage when the word is relevant. There is a stage for which the word itself prepares, when you go beyond the word. Because the ultimate knowledge cannot be expressed in human words, human language. It is ineffable. Still, man needs guidance. Man needs to be led from a state of ignorance to the state of knowledge. So tradition provides for the appearance of God, the Spirit, the divinity, in a human form, embodying the direct divine consciousness in a human form, what are called incarnations. An incarnation is not an evolving being like you and me. An incarnation is a special projection, an emanation of the divine flame, the divine consciousness, for establishing particular special truths that are of importance at certain junctures in the evolution of man. And these incarnations become the founders of religions, new ways of life in different parts of the globe. We revere, in this sense, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Sri Krishna, and so on. Each tradition has its own way of adoring and celebrating the advent of God on earth through this figure or that. But the largest tradition, the universal tradition, regards all incarnations which are held as incarnations by different religions as avatars. An avatar in Sanskrit means a descent. He who descends uncorrupted, direct from the supreme heights. And these incarnations give a body of knowledge that is suited to that level of mind that has developed in the society around them. And that provides a stimulus, a guidance, a lamp for those who want to progress, to grow in knowledge. And the inner knowledge is stimulated to express itself. But these incarnations come once in a few millenniums, and the traditions started by each such incarnation becomes old, the truth gets covered, conventions, traditions, rituals, they encrust this seed of truth, and their wisdom becomes old, stale. And to help humanity, tradition has also the next line of world teachers. They are the prophets. A prophet is not an incarnation. He is what we call in Sanskrit a vibhuti, a brilliant, luminous emanation of a power of the divine. And these prophets, they are not the divine, but they hold a special charge, a special concentration of divine glory, divine power for a particular purpose. And we have the prophets of in different religions, Muhammad, Moses and others, who give their own laws, their own scriptures, which again help humanity. But even these are not enough. Man always needs fresh knowledge, a living tradition. Not all of us are content to draw upon old traditions which are no longer living to us. And to meet this need of a living truth, a living tradition, the spiritual tradition of the world provides for the human teacher. A human teacher is one who has realized unity, union with the divine, holds that realization as a dynamis in himself, and is in a position to communicate that spark to those who come to him. And in India, we call such teachers as gurus. A true guru, a true teacher, upholding the spiritual afflatus which he has realized, is one who does not arrogate to himself a superior pedestal, a superior authority. As Sri Aurobindo states, he is a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, a power or a presence of God calling other presences and powers to the divine. And his method, his way is not through precept, not through oral teaching, not necessarily through verbal teaching, but by example. He lives a life that is so powerful that it constantly emanates the energies, the vibrations that throw the truth on all those who come in the environs. He does not need to speak. There is always an influence of the Spirit, an influence, a charge of the particular aspect of the divine that he has realized emanating from him. Maybe he has realized the divine as bliss. Whenever anyone goes in his presence, known or unknown, is always filled with vibrations of delight. Maybe he has realized the divine as peace and silence. Around him, wherever he lives, there is always a massive wall of silence and peace. However much disturbed you may be mentally or vitally, you are bound to get something of this rock peace which refuses to be disturbed. And he may not have even seen you. A true guru is one who governs. He doesn't govern, he shapes, he builds the inner life of those who come to him, or those who seek for him, in the image, in the mold of his realizations. That is the pristine, that is the first order of gurus. then there are a number of other orders of gurus. The tantras constituting a major tradition in India speaks of a number of gurus. There is a teacher who just awakens the spiritual impulse in you. There is one who shows you the way. There is a third one who just communicates the knowledge, the processes, and there he stops. The fourth one, he leads you to the way, takes you to a certain extent, and then pushes you on the way that is natural to you. So they speak of as many as 15 or 16 types of gurus, all of whom have one role, and that is to put you in touch, to link you to the inner teacher that is inside each one of us. The Gita is very emphatic on the point, and that is the divine is not there alone. God is not there somewhere above the skies. He is there self-extended, the one, but divided in a million forms, extended as and in the universe, and stationing himself as in the universe, indwelling the universe, becoming the universe. He also stations himself in the chamber of the heart, in the core of the being of each individual form, not only human beings, but wherever there is a form, however low in our conception, there is the divine spark, there is the divine presence. And the call is to awake to this presence, to this power that is God within each one of us. And the role of a teacher, I repeat, the guru, is to awaken you to that presence and link you to the power of that presence. Tell you how to place yourself in a receptive condition so that you are in communion with the divine in you. The teacher within me, within you, within everybody is the same universal teacher. In Sanskrit we call is the Jagat Guru. As long as humanity was in its spiritual childhood, kindergarten stage, we needed a lot of spoon feeding from the teachers, and religions and spiritual traditions provided for it amply. But as humanity has been growing, as human consciousness has been evolving, the kind of scaffoldings that we needed for our development and growth are no longer needed. So the institution of the gurus, the institution of these spiritual teachers is slowly coming to a close, because it is always a rule of evolution. Things which are relevant up to a certain stage, when they are no longer relevant, they fall into disuse. And today, at this stage of the development of humanity, when the old consciousness has developed to its optimum point and is being slowly replaced by another consciousness, a spiritual consciousness replacing the mental consciousness. The mental man yielding place to a spiritual man. It is the spiritual consciousness that is coming forward. And we do not need to be led through the mind, through lessons. We have to learn to be awake to the knowledge, to the guidance that is there in each one of us. Of course, there are helps, there are aids. There is a celebrated story in the Indian tradition. There was a great teacher who is lived or is reputed to have lived thousands of years ago. He is still regarded as a master yogi who disregarded all conventions, all dogmas and rules of society, and was a moving and a walking figure of God. Someone asked him, "Sir, who was your guru? Who was your teacher?" He said, I have 24 teachers. They asked him, "What?" He said, "Yes. That tree, that plant, that water, this animal, that dog, this cat, this lizard, each one has taught me. Each one, encounter with each one has been a lesson for me, and I have learned to grow nearer God and into God." Now that should be the attitude for us, to have an opening on all sides. Before we can open to the guidance within, we have to receive whatever guidance is more easily available outside of us. For that, there is all the mystic literature, all the scriptures. But we have to keep in mind one fact, and that is for every scripture in this world, in each one there are two elements. One, a temporal, purely local element which reflects the environmental conditions, the historical conditions that gave birth to that scripture. And they are of no moment, no importance to us thousands of years after. But there is also in each scripture what we call an eternal element, a truth that is of perennial relevance. It is that we must seek and know. And it is not enough to know. There is the question of sincerity. There is such a thing as mental knowledge, and there is such a thing as practical knowledge, effective knowledge. To know a scripture, to understand the eternal element in each scripture mentally, keep it there on the top shelf of our being, without taking pains to translate that knowledge into practice, to make that knowledge real and living to us. That is a failure of man. Unless we translate into life, practice what we know, what we accept as knowledge, we are insincere to ourselves. So this is the first condition for seekers who are entering into the age where gurus will no longer be available, where gurus are not there for the asking. How do we do it? Sincerity. Each one of us must be sincere to our call. Whether my call to spiritual life, call to the divine life, is a true call, is a sincere call, or is it just a momentary reaction to things of world, to the circumstances of life, so disappointments, frustrations and shocks? Or do I feel within like fish out of water. When I don't think of God, when I don't breathe the Spirit of God, but that intensity of aspiration must be there before I can truly tread the path. And once I enter into the path, I must convert every circumstance of life, every bit of knowledge that I get, into a feeder for the growing spiritual life. That is the value of spiritual literature, mystic literature, which holds the consciousness, the vibrations of those who experience the truth. A book written by one who has realized the divine has a distinct power, a distinct concentration of energies which hits you, which slowly grows on you and connects you with the truth that is behind the book. One has naturally to exercise one's discrimination, mental discernment, to see how far the writing is colored by the personality, by the background, by the environmental traditions of the one who has written, one who has had the experience. What is the universal element in it, and what is the personal element in it? This discrimination has to be there. And indeed, human help is required, but human help from guides. There is a great distinction between a guide and a guru. A guru is one who takes the responsibility for your spiritual life, takes upon himself your karma, not only spiritual, but of any kind, and helps you step by step. How many of those are available to us? In their absence, we have to seek the help of guides. A guide is one who is more advanced than myself on the path. He has something to tell me, he has something to teach me, he has something to guide me. And a guide, he will guide only when I seek for his guidance. He will not impose himself. He will not enter into your life. This conception of a guru helping the disciple to change his life, to orientate his life towards the divine, has taken, in certain modern conditions, very queer shapes. They seek to enter and govern and have a hold on every aspect of their life. It was never that way. A guru, a true guru, he puts the necessary force, spiritual force, to help you to come to a correct decision. He doesn't tell you how many spoons of sugar to put in your cup of coffee. He gives you the necessary guidance to feel intuitively I should have said, what is to be done. This recourse to guides, and a guide need not be always one. Many guides. In the spiritual tradition of India, we have what is called the logic of the bee, logic of the bee. There is a bee. How does it feed itself? How does it grow? It goes from flower to flower, from plant to plant, and collects honey for itself. So there is a stage in our lives when we garner knowledge, information from wherever it is available, wherever it is offered, and not only gather as information, but integrate it in ourselves in a body of knowledge. And a time comes when we have to stop going from place to place, but grow in that integrated knowledge. That means a lot of homework, which not all seekers are prepared for. The doctrine of the Guru, as it developed, led to a great amount of laziness, inertia, lack of active response from the disciples who looked to the teacher for everything. You would be amused to know that one of the questions that I was asked, I don't want to be a guru, however, and that was whether spiritual people, husband and wife, should have two beds or one bed. Now this kind of questioning, surrender of one's common sense, is something that is demoralizing. We are expected to become full men, full persons, full beings, and not sub-beings. Why should surrender to the teacher? No, it is surrender to the divine. Surrender to the divine in you. The Gita is explicit that the surrender is of the lower self to the higher self. In each one of us, there is a lower self, there is a higher self. There is a lower nature, there is a higher nature. And this truth is portrayed in Indian art, poetry, in the imagery of two birds. They speak of one tree, two birds on the branches of one tree, one bird on the lower branch, eating the fruit of nature and full of sorrow and pain, and another bird on the higher branch, not eating the fruit but watching its fellow. And when the lower bird looks to the bird above, it loses all grief, because it gets the example. And there is a stage in spiritual life when the two birds meet, when the soul and the oversoul, when the lower self and the higher self, they cohere, they become one. And each one of us has to work out this equation of our lower nature with the higher nature, eliminating the animal legacies of the lower nature, sublimate it, and let it be subsumed by the higher nature. Presiding over the nature is the lower self, what I would call the desire soul and the true soul. And both have to combine. And this has to be done by each one of us. We have to accept the challenge of life, rise to the occasion. We are sufficiently mature beings. Instead of expecting somebody else to work it out for us, we have to work it out for ourselves. And for that, as I said, sincerity. And how do we know that what we understand, what we decide is true, is the right thing? There is in each one of us a source of truth, a source of wisdom. Wisdom is something more than knowledge, and that is at the moment covered by veils and veils of ignorance, falsehood, all brought about by egoism and desire. We have to shed our egoistic load, clip the wings of desire, and cultivate an inner concentration, a certain interiorization of consciousness, by which our consciousness, which is normally spread outward, externally, is turned inwards. There is an Upanishad called the Katha Upanishad, which speaks that the doors of the self are cloven outward, and that is why all the senses rush outward. Hardly one in 1,000 turns his gaze inward, and one among them catches the glimpse of the self. It is this discipline of becoming more and more conscious, not just living from moment to moment like an animal, but detaching oneself from the flow of nature, keeping a certain detachment and observing, and orienting that look, replacing the outlook by the in-look, that has to be cultivated. And this is to be done not only during periods of meditation, periods of prayer, but during all the time. Meditation periods, prayer sessions, they should be what are called the peak periods of experience, for which the day-to-day life must provide the right background. This sincerity, self-exertion, and to be sure that one's decision is right, one has the right guidance. I once asked my teacher how to be sure that what I feel to be the right guidance, the inner guidance is true. And I was told, eliminate your likes and dislikes, preferences and prejudices. So each one has to examine oneself and separate the likes and dislikes, so that the right movement, the right feeling, the right impulse comes without being colored, without being vitiated by our own preferences, of which we may be conscious or half conscious or not conscious at all. This again requires what is called the catharsis, an purification, an inner purification, to divest ourselves of the vitiating elements. And it is in these provinces, in these areas of experience and exertion, it is not for somebody else to do, it is for ourselves. We have reached that maturity, and the time spirit demands that each person has to work for oneself before he can go beyond his humanity. There is in every sphere of life a great urge and a force for decentralization, whether in politics, social reconstruction, economy, religion, spirituality. We are entering into an age of absolute decentralization. Hereafter, whatever tends to be concentrated, whatever tends to live upon concentration of energies, will have no future. Everything is entering into what may be called a decentralized, a spiritual democracy, stage of spiritual democracy, in which each one has to be and will be the leader of himself. Each one has to guide himself. And to the extent that I am my own leader, I help others also to find their own leadership. And the factor that will hold society together, that will hold spiritual communities and religions together, will not be loyalty to one person leading and millions following, or millions swearing by one book, but a diversity of experience. It is a law of evolution in any field, in any area, that the more one evolves, the more complexity, the more diversity, there will be unity, but not uniformity. Unity of truth, unity of love, unity of harmony, but diversity of expression, diversity of experience. So these are the factors that urge and impel a new look, a new approach to the whole question of gurus and spiritual life. And it is also another truth which I would like to bring to your notice, and that is, in all traditions, it is maintained that it is none of the business of a disciple to seek a guru. When the disciple or the seeker is ready, the teacher comes to him. And the teacher comes not necessarily in a human form, but in the form of an event, in the form of a word, in the form of a casual conversation. Somewhere something rings, and all that is arranged by a cosmic intelligence, a providential arrangement by which the divine is always on the lookout for those human beings who are ready. We think of God because God has already thought of us. When I begin to think of a higher life, of a divine life, it is because He has thought, or the divine has thought, that I am ready. And an act of grace, by an act of grace, a helpful ray of consciousness has reached me. And I begin to do that, and when the divine chooses me, it is because evolutionarily I have arrived at that point of transition from the human to the divine. There are many factors in this, and the help comes, the guidance comes through many ways. Only if we have the eyes to see, if we have the sensitivity to feel, if we are not shut up in the cage of our own little superstitions and dogmas and creeds, but can keep our hearts and minds open, the winds of our mind open, the windows of our mind open. We have to be universal men. The age of institutionalized religions is over. We are entering also into an age of universal religion. A universal religion based on love, not on loyalty, not on obedience, but on love. There is a grace, a spontaneous outflow of love from the divine on the universe. And from each one of us, to the extent that we are open inside, to the extent that we are cultivated, we are sensitive, there is always a movement of love, compassion, kindness, benevolence. And these are movements, what are called soul movements, which have to be fostered, encouraged, cultivated. To the extent that we make these movements characteristic of our life, we lay ourselves open to the inner guidance, to the action of the inner being, the soul, the divine within us. What is called conscience is not this inner divine guidance. Conscience is, you may call, a deposit of social history, social background in each individual. The conscience of a man in the East reacts differently, has different values and standards from the conscience of one in the West. A conscience of a Polynesian is quite different from the conscience of an American. And both are right from their point of view. A conscience is that tie between the individual and the society, meant to further their common interests. But this inner guidance is based on truth, which is universal, which will be the same all the world over. And if there are other worlds, and we know there are, it will be valid there also. That is what was meant by the Hermetic teaching. As there, so here. As here, so there. There is one truth, maybe manifoldly expressed, but that truth is common at the soul level to all. And we have to change our pattern of life, our approach to life, our expectation from life, and our very view of life. Life is not meant for salvation, to salvage our souls, but for fulfillment, for perfection. And that fulfillment is in manifesting as much glory of God as one can. And what is that glory of God? Is perfection of knowledge, perfection of bliss, perfection of power, perfection of love. And perfection is not a maximum, not an extreme, but the optimum harmonization of maximum perfection is, as I was saying, not an ultimate, not an extreme, not the highest, the maximum, but an optimum harmonization of all the existing circumstances at the moment. In this perspective, perfection moves from great perfection to greater perfection. It is a dynamic process. What was considered perfection yesterday will not be the perfection that is open to me tomorrow. Life is a dynamic movement, a dynamic process. To be static is to stagnate. We have to be moving. In this age of movement, rapid progress, transition from individual man into universal man, from mental man into spiritual man. It is time we have a new look, a fresh look at ourselves, our ways of functioning, our ways of thinking, realize our responsibilities, and take control of our lives as mature human beings. I have done, and I am open to questions. Truth to tell, there is a great awakening, spiritual awakening and hunger in this country on a scale that is not to be found anywhere else in the world. There is a great demand for knowledge, a great demand for guidance. There is a stir, and wherever there is demand, according to the old economic law, there is a rush of supply. But that supply is something which we have to learn to weed, to sift. Those who are not in demand elsewhere, they come to the market where they are welcome. But humor wit apart, it is true that there is much in Eastern wisdom, Eastern spiritual traditions, which can fill many gaps that are being experienced in the life of an average American or a Western person. But somehow, if the Eastern wisdom is presented in the form in which it prevails in the East, it will not make much sense. It has to be modified, it has to be put in different forms, And inevitably, in this experimentation, in being put in new forms, the soul escapes. We are passing through a transitional period, and I believe the social sense, the spiritual sense of the community is slowly asserting itself in refusing to accept phony things for the true. It is an occult tradition that wherever the truth is to manifest, the truth is to come into being, there will be always many pseudo-truths pretending to be the truths. This is there in the Hindu tradition, in the Mediterranean tradition, in the all occult traditions. So this plethora of so many systems, so many ways, so many teachers, it is only a sign that the true thing is round the corner. It has not yet come. We have to be discriminating. We have to choose what we want. We are mature intellectual beings. We shouldn't place ourselves in circumstances or situations where our lives are run for us by others. It is the truth also that there are levels of human society which will always need a teacher, which will always need a guru. It is their cup of tea. But those who are sincere, serious, who can guide themselves, for them no guru is necessary. We speak of those of the post-Guru era for those who are ready to cross into it, not for everyone. Just as temples, churches, mosques, dogmas have a role to play in the lives of certain grades of humanity still. We can't abolish them. But those who have gone beyond that need, they do not need to go to the temples and churches. They can seek and realize the presence of God where they are. They won't need. So there can be no absolute rule in these matters. Yes. Yes. The question of the individual development and collective harmony is a different theme by itself, requiring a separate treatment. But the question having been raised, I would say that individual spiritual perfection is not possible in an imperfect environment. A perfect man can thrive only in a perfected society. It is the responsibility of each individual as he grows to communicate his growth, his changed quality of consciousness to the collectivity in which he functions. For the collectivity is the field in which the individual lives and works. Collectivity supports him, but individual is the key to the collective growth. So there is a great interrelation and interaction between the individual and the collective. And in the spiritual context, there is no conflict, because both the individual and the collective are two formulations of the same divine truth. One in a collective context and one in an individual one. So it is a simultaneous growth that has to be fostered. An individual spiritual man has a concern to develop the spiritual consciousness of others around him. If he does not, he is a supreme egotist.
There are a lot of experiments through social forms of the family, forms of relationships going on. Do you see a relationship between those social experiments and what you call the post-Guru era?
I would say they are characteristic of the post-individual era, because the age of the individual man is over. The age of the universal man is pressing upon us, and all social adjustment, social reconstructions, social rethinking is proceeding in this direction of breaking the old individual family unit and promoting a social family and eventually a world family unit. So it is a characteristic of the post-individual era. Yes.
About a year and a half ago, I took sannyas from Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh's and although I've been a seeker for many years, many pathways, the speed and efficiency with which things started to happen to me after sannyas is just unbelievable. I was delighted to hear the things you said. And have experienced in India an ashram situation where the dynamics are producing change in people. It's difficult for me to understand that the tremendous dynamics of this change that can happen with such leadership will be completely out of date in the future, that mankind's consciousness can take such a quantum leap as to no longer be helped by that kind of guidance, that kind of energy.
As I said, there will always be categories who will need to be processed by such kind of detailed urgings and teachings. For them, monasteries, ashrams, things of that type will have to be there. But there is growing amidst us a new category of people whose consciousness or sense is awakened and they don't feel the need of subjecting themselves to the supervision or the rule of any one person, whatever you may call a teacher or a guide or a guru or whatever it is. For them the way is open. They will not be in wilderness. The time spirit is helping them. They are finding the teacher inside. And these teachers, these acharyas, these gurus make it possible for you when you want to live on your own. You don't need to live in an ashram for all the 90 years of your life. You have lived for some time in an ashram, you have had, as you said, certain capital experiences, but now you know your way. You are not obliged to stay in India in a particular ashram for the fulfillment of your life. And that is where the disciple is grateful to his teacher, and the teacher wishes him Godspeed. Yes.
How do you feel about using healing affirmations?
How do you feel about
Using affirmations?
affirmations?
Positive statement.
I know it is a very old method. In India also we have got, certain high spiritual formulas in the Upanishads, that I am He, that I am all, He is everything, I am one with Him, and you go on repeating it. The idea is, as you go on repeating verbally, mentally also you dwell upon that idea, and it creates certain grooves in the consciousness, so that life forms in that mold. But the real test, whether it remains just that or it makes for a change in life, that comes when you have to follow the implications of what you affirm in day-to-day life. If I say God is one, all is one, then in my life every other movement except the one promoting unity, one promoting harmony, is out of place. So ego, desire, they have to be eliminated. So if we can follow the practical consequences of what we affirm mentally, it is a very good way and a powerful way, and that is the secret of the science of japa. Yes?
It seems like the arts has been sort of a physical manifestation of spiritual principles that groups or institutions could experience together. Can you comment on the function of art under the new circumstances where people will be functioning more in their own experiences and
The true basis of art, whether it are liquid art or solid art, is to unveil the truth of life, the truths of life. Not our mental conceptions of life, of truths, not our imaginations of truths, but of some experience, some vision which captures a moment of truth. And the spiritual impulse, the spiritual atmosphere that is slowly developing in the world is being reflected more and more in certain forms of art which we see today. And that art first begins with what we may call a subjective art, where you are going beyond the mind, behind the mind, but you have not still found the harmony of the spirit. in between the mental harmony that modern civilization has achieved to a certain extent and the deeper spiritual harmony that is waiting to be actualized, there is a large area of what is called subjectivism, where there is a certain looseness and lack of direction. This is greatly reflected in fiction that is emanating from Soviet Russia, in modern art, what is called modern art in Europe, in this country, and in India. But this is not the final form. What we are moving towards is a revelation of the soul, revelation of the cosmic harmonies. And for that, a collective association, a mutual help in this regard of joining forces is a feeder to spiritual unfoldment in art. So I do feel, despite all the criticisms and condemnations that we read in papers, that art is steadily moving towards something which our literature has not yet touched. Art need not conform to physical forms, to physical objective forms. Because after all, the physical form is only one form of a truth. There are many forms of truth, subtle forms, on a mental level, on a vital level, on a psychological, emotional level, and that art is true, which reflects these various dimensions of truth. Yes?
You mentioned the principle that the emergence of true leaders also brings about the emergence of many pseudo-true leaders and pseudo-truths. I think also the emergence of truth and vision also brings about the emergence of its opposite also. And it seems that we're in an era where we see, world annihilation creeping up on us at the same time as we see this kind of liberation that you are speaking of. I'm wondering if you would address yourself to that dichotomy.
I'm glad this question has been asked of me, because it is true. This world is a realm of possibilities. There is an eternal clash of possibilities, forward and backward, upward and downward. In every way, there is a clash of possibilities. And as truth, harmony, peace is making its way felt, the opposites, as you said, which have been holding humanity in their palm so long, those powers of ignorance and falsehood, those elements of the past which have held humanity in their grip, they are making the last effort to delay, if they cannot defeat, the advent of truth and light. But those of us who have trust, who have faith in the divine grace, we have no doubt whatever that these are the last death pangs of an old world, limited falsehood and darkness, and it will be a thing of the past, like a bad dream. There is enough in the positive evolution of man that justifies the existence of man. As I have been saying in many places, man is the only creature on earth who has demonstrated his possibility and capacity to house in himself, articulate and embody new and newer states of consciousness, without having to change its form. All along, nature had to experiment with new and different forms, discarding some in the process, so as to find the apt vehicles of new states of consciousness. But from the primitive man to this man, present day mental man, how many states of consciousness have been realized? But the form of man did not have to change. Man has shown an immense capacity of plasticity, of adaptation, of making the necessary inner adjustments, emotional, psychic, spiritual, psychological, to change and hold new states of consciousness. And such a crown of evolution of nature's evolution is not going to be discarded. If we believe there is an intelligence in nature, if we believe there is an overseeing providence leading everything towards a certain destined end, destined goal, then the world has still a bright future, and all that has happened and is happening does not shake my faith or those who think as I do. I think it's enough.
I'll just speak without it. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for coming. I don't know if you all know that Peacock will be having a weekend workshop this weekend and the topic there is meditation and spiritual life. So if any of you who are interested in that and haven't already registered want to talk to me afterwards, there will be possible space there for you. And thank you all for coming.